Well, hey everybody, it's Wes Hagen. Welcome to Day Drinking. It is Wednesday, the 10th of June in the glorious year 2020. That I think we're going to probably get through the year. We're almost halfway through, so you know what possibly could go wrong, right? So I do have a totally new setup here for the show, and hey, Don, got sort of a little bit of a thing set up, and I've got my devices now together, so it won't look like I'm looking left to right. I should be looking pretty much the whole thing. Yes, it is hot, sir. And Kai, good to see you. Hope everything is well with you guys over in San Ynez on the edge of Ballard Canyon. Really do appreciate you coming in. Going to be a great show today. We're going to be talking about deductive tasting. I'm going to basically take you through the format in which master sommeliers and people in the court of master sommeliers taste, evaluate wine blind. So we'll go through a little bit of the deductive tasting format from the court of master sommeliers, and we're going to taste a Pinot Blanc and talk a little bit about that varietal. And Nick, welcome, and hope everything is well out there in New York. It is, yes, it is warm out here in California. There is no doubt about that. It's about 81 degrees right now in Santa Maria and in Orcutt, which is southern Santa Maria, and we got up to probably about 87 today. So it was supposed to get up to 91. I did not see my personal website, which basically follows the weather out at the Santa Maria airport, go over 87 today. So tomorrow's supposed to drop 10 degrees, and then the next day it's supposed to drop another 10 degrees, and then we'll be right back at 70 degrees where we are just about every day here in Santa Maria Valley. So, you know, what is the temperature really doing for the vines? Really, remember that the maximum photosynthetic capacity of Vitis vinifera, the grapevine that gives us those wonderful grapes that make this fermented beverage that we call wine, the maximum photosynthetic capacity is 87 degrees. So we're pretty much right there at the point where we can literally almost hear the grapes growing, and I keep saying that too. 90s the past few days, vines have been growing like weeds. Yeah, you know, and the biggest issue for me, I think, and the big difference and the big challenge for both Midwest and Midwest Northern Tier as well as East Coast viticulture, Nick, is you just don't get the diurnal shift. You know, during the summer, it's going to be, what, 92 during the day, and you're lucky if it gets down to 75 at night. The big thing about California, especially coastal Californian viticulture, is that huge diurnal shift, because it's going to be down into the mid 50s tonight. So we'll get 90s, close to 90 degree during the day, and then we'll be down in the 50s at night. It's even colder up in Paso Robles, where you get even more extremes, even hotter during the day and even colder during the night. So it could theoretically be in the low 50s, even early or high 40s tonight in Paso Robles. And summer has started. So as I said, we've probably had more summer-like weather this year already than we had all of last summer. July and August, we've already had hotter days than our entire July and August last year. So I hope you have something refreshing and delicious in your glass. I just so happened to look at the extended forecast and see that today was supposed to be hot when I planned the show. So I thought we'd taste and talk just a little bit. We're going to really be focusing the entire show really on the deductive tasting format of the Court of Master Sommeliers. I am not a member of the Court of Master Sommeliers, nor will I probably ever be. I've always thought that I could probably just sit level 1 or level 2. I don't think it would be necessarily difficult for me to get my certified sommelier, but I don't work on the floor of a restaurant. I don't pour wine for a living, although I do teach a lot of servers all over the country on service. So nice margarita. Well, I hope it doesn't have sour mix in it, or I'd be very disappointed. But yes, in this Greg Wood, good to see you, bro. Your cab vines are growing like crazy here in the hot San Gabriel Valley. Yes. That will definitely get hot. As you might know, I do believe that the mother vine at the San Gabriel Mission might be one of the oldest vines living and producing fruit in the world, and obviously San Gabriel is an incredibly important part of the history of American wine when you look at the amount of fruit that was being produced at the San Gabriel Mission during the Mission era. San Gabriel Mission, I believe, was producing 200,000 gallons of communion and communion wine, basically every vintage. So San Gabriel was, I mean, you could say Santa Barbara was the queen of all missions, and San Diego was sort of the heart and soul of the missions. But man, the San Gabriel Mission always produced an intense and incredible amount of wine. So that's something that I went to La Cañada High School. I grew up in Palos Verdes, Long Beach, and then moved to La Cañada Flint Ridge when I was in 7th grade and lived there until 11th grade and finished up my high school there. And John's getting his 2017 Pet Nat Chenin Blanc from Raj, Hot Weather Delight. Yeah, you know, Pet Nat Chenin sounds fantastic. And I remember when Raj, his first year making wine was at CCWS, and I think he was making wine with Justin Willett, and I think he was now don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure he was. What up, Palos Verdes? Yeah, my dad Don Hagen was the vice principal at both Rolling Hills High School and Palos Verdes High School. So if you knew Mr. Hagen back in the day, if he was your vice principal or your athletic director, yeah, that's my dad. He's a good guy. Before PV, what was I talking about? We were talking a little bit about San Gabriel Valley. Yeah, so, you know, I grew up in La Cañada Flint Ridge and lived out there for a long time, Palos Verdes, Long Beach, and then, you know, definitely hot summers, and I still have lots of friends sort of that live out in between, I would say, Sun Valley all the way out to pretty much like Pomona, but specifically Sierra Madre. I have one of my best friends lives out in Sierra Madre too. Yes, I did see that question about cold maceration. So let's talk a little bit before we bring in the rest of the folks, because we still got about 5 minutes before I bring on these Instagram kids. If you haven't been here before, I do 4:45 on Facebook Live, and then I hit the start button on Instagram literally at 5 o'clock. So we have an adult conversation here for a little while before we bring the Instagram youngins on. So cold maceration and Pinot Noir winemaking before you get going with your show. Absolutely. So what is cold maceration or cold soak? The idea is that you will bring the grapes in from the field to make the wine. You crush, maybe destem, you don't have to, but the idea will be that once either the fruit comes in at night under, say, 55, 60 degrees, then you probably wouldn't have to add dry ice, but we use a medicinal quality of dry ice, a food grade quality of dry ice, and we add maybe 20 or 30 pounds of dry ice to the fermenter as it fills, maybe every 300 or 400 pounds. So we're maybe using 200-300 pounds per 1.5 ton fermenter. And the idea there is to get the fruit chilled down and the juice to chill down into the 40s. So we don't want to freeze it. We don't want to make a Pinot sickle, but we do want to chill the fruit down significantly to try to get some pre-fermentation extraction. And Ian, good to see you, brother. So yeah, that whole idea, and Beth and Phil, thank you guys all for coming out. We're talking about cold extraction or cold soak in Pinot Noir. Here's the most interesting thing. I still have not seen any peer-reviewed studies in any reputable winemaking journal that describe the actual chemical processes that actually show that cold soak does anything. The studies that I saw coming out of Davis in the early 2000s and the late 90s, when I was a little bit more academic about my winemaking, showed clearly that there was no clear difference in wine that was made with a pre-fermentation cold soak and wine that was allowed, wine that was inoculated with yeast or basically, you know, a longer, cooler fermentation. Now that's something different, but there is not a lot of evidence that cold soak really does anything. And that was pretty much, and I believe it was Emile Pinot, or was it, no, was it Pinot? that was originally talking maybe about cold soak and suggested it. Here's the deal. In the end, I cold soak. And so does every winemaker I know who makes Pinot Noir in Santa Barbara County, and every winemaker basically I've talked to. It's one of those things that is sort of anecdotal. It's sort of like Pascal's wager. You know, why not pray on your deathbed? If there's no God, whatever. If there is, maybe they'll think that you were a good person beyond just having to say something on your deathbed. The idea is really there's no clear scientific evidence that cold soak or cold maceration has much of an impact. It's a matter to me whether you want to extract color early or you want to extract color during primary fermentation. The idea though is if you get the early extraction, I think the sympathetic magic part of our brain, that sort of reptile part of our brain thinks, oh wow, we're getting color early. And if I'm used to getting color late and I get color early, I get more color. Well, that's really probably not 100% accurate, but we still do it. Probably because it's hard for me to admit this as someone who purports myself to be pro-science. And that is sometimes how we are taught trumps the scientific evidence. So I was taught by Brian Babcock to do a cold soak, to put the grapes in a cold room, chill it down as much as you can, extend that out, and wait for the fermentation. The fermentation doesn't start for 2 or 3 days. And Nikki, so lovely to see you here. We were talking a little bit about cold soak. Thank you, Nick, for reminding me about that question. And Josh is in the house. Josh, I hope everything's well down in San Diego. And Jim's here, and Ian's drinking a 17 Pinot Blanc. 17 Pinot Blanc. I really love that wine. Even though it was a slightly warmer vintage, I think it's in a really beautiful place. We're going to do the 18 Pinot Blanc tonight, so I'll talk to you a little bit about that. Cool. Awesome. It looks like it's probably close enough. I'm just going to go ahead and bring on our Instagram folks, and let's just jump right in, unless anyone else has any questions up here on Facebook. And I hope this is a little bit more helpful today, because I've taken away one entire computer that used to have a webcam. So I used to have a laptop, an iPhone, and a iPad all going to various channels. I have eliminated my personal website channel, and now we're just doing J. Wilkes Wine Santa Barbara and all of our friends on Instagram. So I'm gonna fire up Instagram and let's get right into it. So this will be an awesome time. Go ahead and get yourself something delicious to drink. And good, I'm glad you're well, Josh. Get yourself something delicious to drink. We're gonna be talking about Court of Master Sommeliers and deductive tasting tonight. So I have no idea how long this is gonna take. We're no spit bucket, no plan, no net. We're just going off the cuff and having some fun. Although I do have one thing you might want to do is look online, and if you're on your computer or it's easy, Google Court of Master Sommeliers deductive tasting. Court of Master Sommeliers deductive tasting, and you might want to just have that chart open somewhere on your computer if it's easy. If you're on your phone or on your iPad, don't worry about it, but I'm going to be going off of the chart that you can download right off of a number of different sites that reference the Court of Master Sommeliers deductive tasting format. All right, I'm hitting the button. We're bringing in the kids. Sweet. Instagram, Facebook. Welcome to Day Drinking with Wes Hagen. It's the 10th day of June, and my mom just had a birthday. She's decided she's going to be a young adult fiction writer. She's working on a novel right now. That's what I did when I went to college. I studied creative writing, fiction workshops, as well as poetry. So I'm trying to help my mom write these sort of young adult mysteries. I guess maybe there's going to be some open niche space in that sort of a literary sort of definition. Now maybe that J.K. Rowling is not as popular as she was last week. 2020, man, who knew? It's brutal for so many people for so many reasons. But what I find is if you're kind to everyone, you're nice to everyone, you're open to different ideas, and you do everything possible to encourage flourishing within your cohort, your community, your nation, and the world, it just seems like stuff kind of works out. So really kind of looking forward to that. This is day drinking, so I hope you have something delicious at hand. Whether it's beer, wine, spirits, Coca-Cola, I really don't care. We're just hanging out, talking, drinking, having fun. So really looking forward to seeing all of you. And it looks like we got a good group coming in on Instagram. So super stoked you guys all joined us. What are we talking about today? Well, I'm drinking beer, but that won't last very long because my blood sugar is a little bit low right now. So, you know, I don't want to drink beer. Day drinking is not that interesting to me. Wink, wink. But when my blood sugar is low, I just have to drink beer. So it's a good excuse. And today's choice is a little Ballast Point. And a lot of people are talking about Ballast Point. It went corporate. They sold out. There were and some people are like, well, beer is not as good as it used to be. I don't really find that to be true. I find this also to be accurate for Russian River as well. I have not seen a lick of drop of quality in the beers that I've been drinking out of Russian River Brewing since they expanded and started making a lot more beer. So, one of my favorite quotes on corporations was Bill Moyer, who says, I will believe a corporation is a person when Texas executes one. Love you, Texas. I'm not talking too much stuff. Remember, this was also the state that had a governor named Ma Barker. And you know what Ma Barker said? She literally said this on the record. If English was good enough for our Lord Jesus Christ, it's good enough for the children of Texas. I'll leave that alone. Let's talk about deductive tasting, shall we? So what I'm going to do, as we always do at the beginning of the show, I'm going to open a bottle of wine. So tonight, we're going to open a bottle of 2018 Pinot Blanc. This Pinot Blanc is basically grown in Santa Maria Valley. It is unusual in the world of J. Wilkes, because J. Wilkes wines are almost always blends of different vineyards. We actually only have one vineyard source. And if we have a vineyard source, we don't vineyard designate this wine. And we don't charge you the extra money for the vineyard designation. If we put the vineyard designation on this bottle of wine, it would probably be $30 to $35 because it's grown predominantly at Bien Nacido Vineyard, which of course the Miller family owns. It pays my bills. That is my boss. So we are making really a Bien Nacido Pinot Blanc. But at the same time, we don't put it on the label. We don't make a big deal about it. We just want people to know that it is a Santa Maria Valley Pinot Blanc. And I would not use Pinot Blanc for the J. Wilkes program if the vineyard designation, if the single vineyard did not give a wine that represented to me how the varietal Pinot Blanc expresses itself throughout the whole AVA. The key to the J. Wilkes program to me and the way that I want to make these wines is that I want them to be representative of a region, a place, but not a site, if that makes sense. I don't want you to say, we don't do vineyard designations, even though some of these wines are from a single vineyard or a couple of our estate vineyards. So, but we really want to make sure that regardless of the vineyard sourcing and how many vineyards are in there, that each wine we make is a perfect indication of the typicity of the Santa Maria Valley, of the Santa Rita Hills, of the Paso Robles Highlands District. And here's first comment, first time I've ever actually mentioned this publicly. We are going to do a Syrah from Ballard Canyon. So it's going to be tasting room only. It's going to be a tiny, tiny, tiny little production, maybe 100 cases. But we are going to try to start making wines from every AVA that I wrote and helped develop. So I helped write, I did write the AVA petitions for Santa Rita Hills, Ballard Canyon, Happy Canyon, and Alisos Canyon AVA, which should actually get its final approval this year, hopefully before harvest. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about blind tasting. Why? Why do we want a blind taste? Well, as a winemaker and as a wine personality, I guess that would be on a good day. You'd be surprised how many times I'll be at a wine dinner or a restaurant, or specifically I get this all the time at the Winemaker Magazine conference. I've been writing for a magazine called Winemaker Magazine. It focuses on people who make small production, homemade wines and that grow grapes in their backyard or in small amounts of vineyards. So let's talk a little bit about when you're a pro, people love to test you. And this, I mean, if you're Robert Parker, it's even worse. You're going to get hundreds of people basically probably per week asking if you want to guess what wine is in their glass. So we call this sort of the guess which wine game, or qu'est-ce que c'est, what the hell is it? Let's try to find out what's going on. So it happens to me back when I used to travel all the time. Now not so much unless I test myself, but someone will give me a glass of wine and say, what is it? So let's pretend I didn't know that I'm pouring the 2018 J. Wilkes Pinot Blanc, which is a very atypical Pinot Blanc. Well, it's not that atypical. It's atypical for me because I live with this wine, but this wine, part of this wine did spend a tiny little bit of time in a different cellar, cellar of Steele wines. Jed Steele made a little bit of this wine. We bought some back from him to fill in a little bit of the gap because we didn't have enough juice ourselves. So this is going to be a little bit atypical for what a Pinot Blanc tastes like. And we did some certified and advanced sommeliers taste this wine at a tasting in Denver, Colorado, maybe 10 months ago, 11 months ago. And they had a really hard time nailing down the varietal. A lot of them actually thought, because of the slight waxiness of this wine, a little bit more richness and unctuousness of this wine as a result of some of the barrel fermentation at Steele. I think they were thinking maybe it was a Grenache Blanc or something like that. So where do we go? What questions do we ask ourselves? Well, the entire chart, and for you wonderful Instagram folks, what I have in front of me is the chart that's put out by the Quartermaster Sommeliers. So if you put in a Google search, Quartermaster Sommeliers deductive tasting format, or deductive tasting, or just deductive, you're going to find, if you go to the images section, you're going to see 100 different versions of this checklist. This, I'm probably going to go ahead and laminate this and always have it in my wine bag so I can pull it out. So if people ask me to do this, I have an opportunity to actually look at what this does. Now, what it does is the deductive format for the Quartermaster Sommeliers basically breaks down all the different aspects of the way that you want to look at the wine. You want to taste the wine, you want to smell the wine, obviously. And you're going to be asking yourself these questions again. So, for example, the first thing you ask yourself is the clarity of the wine. Is the wine clear, or I would even add brilliant. Brilliant, clear, hazy, or turbid. That would be the first thing. The second would be, is the concentration of the color pale, medium, or deep? And then lots of other questions about whether there shows any frizzante, a little bit of crémant, a little bubbliness. Is the wine completely still, or is it showing some gas? Secondary colors, rim variation, all these things, and then the nose. But really what I want to get to is the questions I ask myself when I stick my nose in a glass of wine that I have no idea where it's from. And that would probably be the first question I ask myself almost every time. Is this an old world or a new world wine? Basically, is it a Western European wine, or is it not a Western European wine? So what are you going to do? What are you going to do as far as asking yourself and telling yourself, what's the difference? Is it just as easy to say a new world wine is fruity and bright and primary, and an old world wine might be a little bit more rustic and complex, mineral and restrained? I think that's a way to go. So when I normally, this really does require a lot of practice. The same way that you cannot sit down at a piano and just play Rachmaninoff or Debussy, there's just no way, right? Because you don't have the practice. Now, remember that this process is developed for people that have studied for years, if not decades, to train their palate to recognize certain elements, certain ideas. So remember, when you actually get to what they call their initial conclusion, because you ask yourself about 30 questions, everything about the nose, is it clean or faulty? What's the intensity, the age, and the assessment of it? The fruit character, non-fruit, earth, mineral, wood. On the palate, sweetness, fruit character, non-fruit character, earth, mineral, wood. On the palate, phenolic and bitterness, tannin, acid, alcohol, body, texture, balance, length, finish, and complexity. Then, once you get to there, then you go to your initial conclusion. Once you've basically filled in the gaps for everything as far as the visual idea of the wine, the aromatic qualities of the wine, I would include bouquet, aromatics being what's produced, or aroma is being produced by fermentation, and basically bouquet is anything that is produced by aging. Once you have an idea of the clarity of the wine, the color of the wine, the rim of the wine, the age of the wine, the nose of the wine, and then the mouth of the wine, once you got all of that stuff together, you make your initial conclusion. And the first question I always ask myself in the initial conclusion, and when I take people through wines, and I do this quite a bit, where I'll bring an atypical wine, maybe an old Côte de Rhône that I bought at Costco 12 years ago, that's predominantly Grenache with a little bit of Syrah and Mourvèdre, maybe a tiny little bit of something else. Okay, so put it in your glass and smell it and ask yourself, do you think this wine is old world and new world? And you have to just all of a sudden bring in your entire frame of reference for every wine you've ever drank. If you want to use a brutal sort of generalization, yes, you can say, in general, if the wine smells of bright, effusive fruitiness, I would put my bet on New World. Australia, South America, North America, these areas are obviously going to be very important for showing bright fruit. Now, is that because of terroir, or is that because of production techniques? Well, now or ripeness, right? Because in the New World, let's be really very careful with what we say here. In the New World, I'm going to go ahead and say the currency of the New World is sunshine and ripeness. And the fact that these wine industries basically came of age in a time where technology and science were much more in charge than when wine came up in Europe. When wine came up in Europe in a pre-Enlightenment, pre-Pasteur situation, where the wines being made pre-1850 in Europe were being made by the seat of their pants, because they did not know how fermentation actually occurred. Before Louis Pasteur used Leeuwenhoek's microscope and saw the fermentation kinetics and how fermentation actually existed and it actually worked, basically Saccharomyces cerevisiae breaking down disaccharide sugar to pyruvate to ethyl acetate. Basically, it's an intensely simplified description into ethanol. And then our liver does the exact opposite. Ethanol. It's so cool that basically yeast in our liver do the exact opposite things. Like yeast turns sugar into alcohol, and our livers turn alcohol back into energy. And it's freaking miraculous. And once you understand the actual process of it, it's just absolutely intensely cool. So if the currency of New World wine is sunshine, that means the wines are going to taste of sunshine. Here's the problem. Now Europe's getting the sunshine. Europe used to be planted. The thing we used to say about Europe that can be true of any European vineyard, of any European region, is the grapes that are growing there are planted there because they're on the edge of being able to get ripe. So in a great vintage, you get ripe. In a poor vintage, you don't. Now what we're seeing is hotter summers, more heat summation, more degree days, and we're seeing higher ripeness in Europe. And as a result, crazy things are happening. Like they just approved another 7 or 12 grapes to be put into Bordeaux. Touriga Nacional, the main grape used in port wine production in Portugal, can now be put in non-numbered growths. I think Cru Bourgeois and lower, or Cru Van Ordinaire. You can suddenly in Bordeaux really start putting almost any grape you want in there. So times are changing. What we used to be able to say about Europe is quite different. We used to be able to say that you only get a good vintage in Europe when the vintage is right, when the year is perfect. I don't think that's true anymore. Now what we're seeing, and I have to say, as an American winemaker, let me be a little snarky here, that Europe used to say, oh, California is all overripe tripe. You know, it's all overripe. It's just it's too much alcohol, too much extract, and we have the complexity, we have the age worthiness, we have the history. And then global warming or climate change starts to happen, and we're seeing riper and riper vintages starting to occur in Burgundy and Bordeaux and even Champagne and Alsace and all these places. And they just keep declaring, oh, vintage of the decade, vintage of the century. These wines are absolutely great. As they become more New World and become slightly homogenized by virtue of their ripeness, they appeal to an American audience, like the Beatles singing without a very strong American accent. Americans love Big Mac milkshake French fries, so when the wine is big and rich and ripe, we tend to love it, and so do the critics, so they get higher scores. So they're kind of on a slippery slope a little bit, right? Warmer temperatures are getting the wines riper. The riper wines are getting better scores, and so the better scores are elevating those properties and getting them on board with making big ripe wines, which a lot of collectors are saying is stealing the soul of Burgundy, is stealing the soul of Bordeaux, is stealing the soul of Champagne. I still think if you can't find great wines from that region and they're going to be a little riper, so be it. It's just the way that things go. And if new grapes need to be grown, so be it. So, Old World, New World is now becoming a very difficult decision to make. And that's the first question I ask people. I'll pour them wine out of a bag or wrapped in tin foil, take the capsule off, make sure they can see. Here's the problem: if it's a screw cap wine, I would actually put it in a decanter. So how many Old World wines are really under screw cap? Not very many. I think if you play this game, the genius of your human discernment should include the idea that you're looking at every possible thing that you can see. So if someone pours a wine blind for me and I see a screw cap, I use it. I use it because I saw it. I discerned it. They decided to pour it in a screw cap. Everyone else saw that it was poured out of a screw cap bottle. So, I'm thinking New Zealand, I'm thinking Australia, I'm thinking California, I'm thinking South America. These are the things that are going through my head. So never ignore any clue that you have. If you're blind tasting, you're not actually blind. You're actually seeing a lot of things about that wine with all of your different senses. So do use all of those senses. So when we get through Old World, New World, where do we go next? Most sommeliers, even before going to Old World, New World, might actually consider varietal composition before they make their decision on Old World, New World. I like Old World, New World as my first question, and then maybe I would ask myself, okay, grapes. Is this the first question I would ask, and we're being deductive. Remember what Arthur Conan Doyle said through Sherlock Holmes, that when you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. When you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, regardless of how improbable, must be the truth. So deductive tasting is all about removing the impossible, getting rid of whatever can possibly be there, right? Yes, Ian, all's fair in love and wine tasting. So what you want to do is ask yourself, what do I know this isn't? This is not Merlot. This is not Mourvedre. This is not Chardonnay. This is not Sauvignon Blanc. That is very important because we only drink like 12 grapes, right? So, okay, so let's start playing, right? So we kind of have an idea of the deductive chart. We have a little idea about the initial conclusion. We want to think Old World, New World. And then what I would ask, even before varietal composition, cool climate, moderate climate, warm climate. Old World, New World. Own it. I believe this wine is Old World. Cool climate, moderate climate, warm climate. Boom. Champagne, cool. Burgundy, traditionally cool. You can almost take it to moderate. Probably Beaujolais, probably moderate. Bordeaux, warm. Rhone, warm. depending on where you're going, those are the things we're asking. So I'm going to have to sort of lobotomize myself currently, and imagine I had Mr. James Kennedy. It was probably Mr. Spock, but he was probably rolling definitely off of Arthur Conan Doyle and our friend Sherlock Holmes. So I'm going to lobotomize myself, pretend I have no idea what I'm drinking. So I always imagine that a lot of this, especially the 18, reminds me a lot of almost like a lemon lime soda bubbling through limestone or chalk. I get chalk, lemon, lime, sort of white blossoms. Aromatic white wine's tough because a lot of places where aromatic white wine is grown, the aromatics are big and the fruit is big. So, I mean, could this be Alsace? Could this be the Alto Adige? Well, it could be. Also, I think I'm going to be a little bit confused because of the small amount of this wine. It's not 100% intentional wine. I had the intention of our winemaking crew to make the Pinot Blanc we made, and then Jed Steele made the Pinot Blanc he wanted to make. And stylistically, they were different. So when they came together, they made an amalgam that is a little bit unusual and a little bit atypical. And there is a minerality and a sort of chalky density to this wine that wants me to say it could be Old World. It's lean, it's mineral, it's not acidic. This is the thing that may point me to New World. I would love to think that because this wine, if I recognize it as an aromatic white, I'm thinking Pinot Blanc, Pinot Grigio, Chenin Blanc, great minerality. So the minerality makes my brain start thinking, ooh, complex, maybe Old World. But then the acidity in this wine is apparent. It is plentiful, but it is not at all what I would expect of the level of acidity of an aromatic white wine out of Europe, which I would expect to be significantly higher in acidity than what we would get in the New World. I also know that the way that we make wine at J. Wilkes, we appreciate acidity, but we know in a broad market situation for wines by the glass, getting people to really, really dig these wines, in general, telling people that the wine is highly acidic is generally not considered a beneficial descriptor of a wine. So even though I love to make wines that have beautiful acidity and gorgeous structure, the wines that we make at J. Wilkes don't have the same level of sort of mouth-stripping acidity as the wines that I made perhaps at Clos Pepe. They're a little more balanced in that sense. I'm not trying to make a point. I like to say that the Clos Pepe wines had more acid than a Dead Show parking lot. Really does show so much of that chalky, saline minerality. So, okay, I'm just going to assume that I'm going to say the right thing and say, okay, boom, let's just go ahead and say this is a New World wine. Well, if this is a New World wine and it's an aromatic white wine and it reminds me of an Old World wine, chances are if I'm going to go New World wine, I'm going to say it's coming from a cool climate. A wine like this with the floral aromatics, the sort of blossom aromatics, and a lot of leanness and that beautiful character, I'm just going to say, if I'm going to pull the trigger and say New World, I'm going to say cool climate because I don't think you can make this wine in the New World. Outside of a cool climate. And then, okay, so then your next question would be either possible grape varieties or possible countries. Which would be more helpful? To answer first, which is, I like to say, which is more general in a deductive sense, because as long as you can answer the easy questions. So I always ask, if I'm gonna own my answer, I want to go to the questions. It's just like like a crossword puzzle. Fill in what you know, and then everything else is going to fill in, and you're going to get some clues by where the letters lie, right? So to me, I could not definitively call this wine Old World or New World, so I'm already a little bit screwed and already a little bit hamstrung in my ability to do that. I'm giving myself a little bit of credit, saying if I said it was New World and I said it was cool climate, then, okay, I'm going to say countries is easier than grapes. I'm starting thinking of aromatic white wines in the New World. Oregon, California, certainly some nice things being done in Washington. Virginia, you can't discount Viognier. I don't think this is Viognier. But how easy it is, okay. Now, I made the tough decision on New World. Now I made the tough, a fairly easy decision on cool climate. So now I'm just going to go ahead and say the United States. I'm going to say this is an American wine. Of course, I know what this wine is, so I'm trying to imagine how I would describe my process and by deduction. So I bought in on U.S. and all it says is possible countries. I don't have to fill in, the region specifically. Now, if I tried to get a little bit further into the region, I could certainly do that. We could try to figure out state, county, AVA. If you can get to the vineyard, I could certainly not. I don't think I would be able to guess that this wine is Pinot Blanc, and I don't think I would probably be able to guess that it's Bendecido. That being said, I don't know. Maybe I'd taste a lot of Pinot Blanc from Bendecido. Maybe I could. And then your last two opportunities would be your age range and your grape varieties. Like I said, first of all, you got to ask yourself, is this single varietal or is this a blend? And then you also have to ask yourself, is this wine 1 to 3 years old, 3 to 5 years old, 5 to 10 years old, or 10 years or older? And that kind of is the summation of the deductive chart. Get this format, look at it, love it, dig it, understand it, and practice. Because the more you can practice, obviously, the better you're going to get. That's pretty much what I had for you tonight. Some of these we're gonna make a little bit shorter. I'm getting a little bit better at this. I'm learning to focus in a little bit. If anyone have any questions, what I'm going to do is I am going to actually go get myself another glass of wine, and I'm going to be gone from camera for about 30 seconds. Then I'm going to come back, finish up with some questions, and then we'll get you guys on to dinner or whatever else is doing tonight. So I'll be right back. All right, apologize for the dead air. I'm going to be looking at Albarino as an aromatic white wine. What removes it from the possibility? Well, I think Albarino probably for this 2018 could have been. I get a little more of the lemon lime aroma in the nose, which really reminds me more of white Pinot genetic accession. So I would think Pinot Grigio, Pinot Blanc first. I would expect there to be a little more kind of like yellow plum and a little more breadth in the nose. This nose is a little bit more kind of lean. Chenin, I'd say Pinot Blanc, Pinot Grigio tend to be very, very lean. Chenin tends to be a little bit bigger in the nose, and then Chardonnay tends to be even a little bit bigger than that. Albarino, somewhere between Chenin and that. Albarino also commonly goes through malolactic fermentation. This is clearly non or partial mallow, so that's why I took the Albarino out of the potential. Yeah, lots of minerality, Nick. I'm glad you're tasting it too. And Tommy, hope everything's good. Tommy works down at our tasting room in Santa Barbara, so if you pick up some wine and a really nice guy, kind of takes care of you and brings your wine out to your car. It's probably Tommy, so thank you. Oh, Michelle, so lovely. Our one of the people who works for the Miller Family Wine Company. Salinity, my favorite wine description. Yeah, because minerality, what the hell does that mean? There's saline minerality, chalk minerality. So I like to say, I'm trying to divorce myself of relying on the term minerality. And Denise, so glad that you're here. Yeah, it's the word acid that messes with some heads. Yeah, it's actually best practices within being a wine ambassador to never use the word acid. I strongly try not to describe a wine as acidic or having good acid or having good, because yeah, I like cut, lively, verve, any of those words. But yeah. In general, people are like, why would I want to put acid in my mouth? It's like, you weren't in the 60s, I guess. I was alive in the 60s, but I only was alive for 9 months in the 60s. So I've actually been alive for 7 decades. I've been alive 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. 7 decades, but I'm only 51 years old. Oh, Dave, I'm stoked you're digging that Smashberry Rosé. Didn't they do a good job with that? By the way, so 77% Grenache, 20% Syrah, 3% Chardonnay. There you go. Yes, and James Kennedy, I'm glad you brought up Spock because just so you know, Bill Shatner actually saw me doing a radio show at Ruth's Chris in Pasadena last year and basically tapped my finger and put a glass over my shoulder. I'm like, who the hell would interrupt me in the middle of a frickin' radio wine show being listened to by, the guy says 1 million people. I don't know. It's a cable radio network. It's a good show. And he's good friends with the host of this cable radio network show. So, I'm kind of wondering, why would someone tap my shoulder and put a empty glass in my face right in the middle of a wine show? And I literally look over my shoulder and it's Bill Shatner, and I'm like, oh my God, I've been told he's a very difficult man to approach and you should never approach him because he's not very friendly. And I also learned that he's one of the more wealthy people in Southern California as a result of when he did all that stuff with Priceline. He did not take any money from Priceline for those commercials. He took stock. And Priceline, after his commercials went through the frickin' roof, I heard an obscene, if not profane, amount of money came to him. So there you go. And he does drink, and he came back 4 minutes later and tapped me again. He's like, well, that's really good. Can I have some? I'm like, yeah, as long as you tell me that, tell me that I can use your name in promotion. So, 92 points WS does not mean Wine Spectator. In this circumstance means William Shatner gave the wine 92 points. So now I did get to meet Kirk, and he looks great for 80 years old. I'm telling you, he just had his 80th birthday. I won't bring up the hair. Yes, Phil's looking up. There's, I think, 12 new grapes approved to be grown in Bordeaux for wines. I don't believe they can go in the defined crus. They have to be in non-cru wines. Yeah, Spain. Spain's tough. Spain's got so much sunshine, right? I mean, Spain Spain gets me because I've had Spanish Grenache. I've had Spanish wines that were so bright, so fruity, and so fruit forward. And to make it even more difficult, European producers are getting really crafty, and they're getting clean, and they're sending their kids to the United States and to the New World to make wine. So we're seeing the crossover of wine technology, wine flavors, varietals. As they replant their vineyards, they're using the new trellising technology. So the way wines are grown and the way wines are made are becoming globalized. And as a result, they're becoming more and more difficult. And I totally agree with you, Ian, that Spain is probably my #1 problem in the old world for being misclassified as new world when I'm deductive tasting or tasting blind. Honestly, too, if you ever have a chance to go to SomCon or one of these great big wine festivals where a lot of professionals are there, and they're going to bring in, like, it's usually a seminar called like Taste with the Master Sommeliers, and what they'll do is they will take a wine that literally no one knows what it is, and like 3 or 4 of them will go through the deductive process out loud, smelling, tasting as you're tasting it. You will never have a better opportunity to understand how to taste blind than actually participating in one of these Taste with the Master Sommelier things. I've done it 3 or 4 times, and every time I do it, I become a better taster. So that's really, really important. Ruth, right now, you're near Redlands. Obviously, that's where I went to school. I lived in the Inland Empire for about a full decade, so I know sometimes it's hot out there. I won't completely and totally share exactly what beverage you're enjoying. Normally, I would say that it's stealing some of the thunder away from the wine business right now. But they're clean, bright, and delicious. So whatever you're drinking, I say I don't judge. So say hello to Redlands for me. I bet it's got to be 95 degrees down there. No Viognier co-ferment. It's going to be from, this is question about the J. Wilkes Syrah. It's going to be probably going to be 100% Syrah. It might end up being 5% Grenache, or we might find a way to blend it to make it even better, but it will not have any co-fermented Viognier. We did not co-ferment that one. Folks talking about a little bit of Santa Cruz Mountains wine. Wow, I mean, there's so many beautiful wines being made up there, and what a beautiful place. And Stan and everybody else talked a little bit about that. Oh, and our friend Karen in Arlington, D.C. I just want to say that when you told me that you were sipping some wine at the Lincoln Memorial yesterday, doing a little protesting, I have to admit, that was a very awesome and wonderful thing. The idea that my voice and my presence were somehow affiliated with being there in in those monuments in our nation's capital right now is very meaningful to me. So thank you for that. What are the best 5 wines that you think would be representative of American wine regions? Best 5 wines that you think would be representative of American wine regions. Well, obviously Pinot Noir, because it doesn't suffer fools. Cabernet Sauvignon, because it is the American grape and it represents everything Americans want. Strength, Big Mac milkshake, French fry. It's got all the flavors. It's big, it's rich, it's ripe. I'm going to throw Merlot in there because I think Merlot is still incredibly important. I'm going to throw Norton in there as number 4 because if you think that Norton's not important, then you live on a coast and you have no idea what is happening in so many different regions that are not coastal and elite sort of areas where wine's being grown. Gotta put Chardonnay as number 5. So I'm going Pinot Noir, Cabernet, Merlot. I would put Syrah instead of Merlot, but quite honestly, Syrah hardly even sells enough to actually have a conversation about it. I wish it didn't. I wish Syrah was one of the most popular grapes. I wish Syrah would take over Pinot Noir for a while and get its moment. Syrah deserves, Syrah deserves its mezcal moment. It deserves its tequila moment. It's to a certain extent, it's kind of performing like rum. Everyone's waiting for rum to have its moment, right? It's had its moment for me. I love good aged rum, especially from interesting areas, especially Nicaragua. But when will it have its moment? And we just don't know. So that's kind of I'm going to put Merlot in because I think Merlot really appeals to American wine drinkers, even though some people don't like to admit it because of that stupid movie about men behaving badly. There you go. So and then because those grapes I think can be grown in various regions, Chardonnay can be grown in so many different places. Pinot Noir not. Cabernet, Merlot, more areas than Pinot. Norton, very, very able to be grown in a lot of different places, and Chardonnay being able to grow in a lot of different places. So that's sort of where I would go with that. Awesome. Yeah, it's so interesting that some places... Oh, my wife is watching me. She has to watch me all day long, but she's still doing there. Workman Ayers 16 white wine Viognier blend. Awesome. Thanks for drinking. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. And we've got our Repour Wine Saver folks and our Vin Voyages. Let's see. Uh-oh. Well, it looks like I just cut off the rest of our Instagram folks. So I think I've answered some questions. If you guys have any other questions, let me know. I will certainly go back and look to see if there's any other questions that I missed. Other than that, I hope you guys had a great time on Day Drinking with Wes Hagen. Don't forget, Friday we'll be here with Roxy Ward, awesome winemaker here at the Miller Family Wine Company. We'll talk about the wine she makes for Smashberry and for Barrel Burner. So come on in. Friday we'll be doing a Zoom talk. You can go either in directly to the Zoom or you can be right here. It will not be on Instagram, but it will be here on the Facebook at J. Wilkes Wines Santa Barbara. So have a great day, everybody. I hope you guys had a fun time. Cheers.